How are Agilists faring in the pandemic? How are we finding meaning and purpose in these troubled times? How can we connect, inspire, and support each other? We will explore answers to these questions and more. This is Agile Caravanserai. I'm Sanjeev Augustine. Andy Hunt is one of the 17 authors of the Agile Manifesto and a very well-known author, publisher, and musician. Andy has long impressed me with his intense commitment to the discipline of software development. Unlike those who get lost in arcane tools and techniques, Andy has always championed a very straightforward, pragmatic approach. Along with fellow Manifesto author Dave Hunt, Andy has authored the seminal book, The Pragmatic Programmer, way back in October of 1999, even before the manifesto was signed. Andy and Dave also founded the Pragmatic Bookshelf series of books with a simple goal, and that was to improve the life of professional software developers. So over the years, Andy and Dave have created timely, practical books and videos to help developers practice their craft and to accelerate their careers. They incorporate stories and analogies like the broken windows theory and the boiling frog theory to convey concepts in simple and memorable ways. Andy has written over a dozen books, believe it or not, including science fiction novels, and tweets about code, life, and Zen at Pragmatic Andy. Here is Andy Hunt. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been a great privilege and pleasure to have known you over the last couple of decades. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
So the format of this interview is pretty simple. I'm going to ask you 3 questions. So let's jump straight into the first one. Given that this is the anniversary month, 20th anniversary that is, of the Agile Manifesto, and you were one of the original authors, there are folks out there, your fans and the fans of Agile around the world, that are looking to know specifically from you, what are some of the reflections that you have over the last 20 years or so of the Agile movement?
Let's see if I can answer that in under a couple of hours. It's interesting that it's the 20th anniversary because last year was the 20th anniversary of the Pragmatic Programmer book that Dave Thomas and I wrote. As we jokingly say, back at the turn of the century. There was a lot going on then. It was a really fun and interesting time. And, the industry was really kind of on it's trite to say it was on a precipice, but it sort of was. And folks were interested in finding better ways of doing things. And that's actually one of the lines in the manifesto that people often don't quote. It starts off saying, we are uncovering better ways. It doesn't say that we discovered the 10 commandments etched in stone, right? It's a process of discovery. And that's, I think, one of the key ideas that maybe has gotten lost along the way. We didn't say, this is how you do it. We said, we're examining, we're experimenting, we're trying to find other ways to approach this. So when we wrote the Pragmatic Programmer, we were trying to distill kind of better ways that we'd found of doing things, but not even really better ways of doing things, better ways of thinking about it, better ways of looking at it, sort of better mental models and approaches, not really just use this tool, use that tool, use this design technique, always use microservices, never use microservices, whatever the flavor of the day might be. None of that kind of stuff, but more about, well, how would I figure out if I needed to use microservices or if I wanted to do this or that or the other thing? And, the book was surprisingly popular. We had no idea that 20 years later, we'd be writing a second edition or that, people would be into that. And, it just kind of hit the right note at the right time. And the manifesto was pretty much the same thing in a different space. So here you had 17 folks who were very interested in getting around the current problems of software development back at the turn of the century. Heavyweight processes, lots of paperwork, lots of documentation. My second or third job out of college, we had to produce detailed design documents on the VAX for this GUI system that we were writing. And of course, it was a disaster because all those things end up being a disaster because we have this kind of human nature to think that, okay, I can envision this future state. This is what I want the project to look like. This is what I want the company to look like. You guys just go build it. Right? Wouldn't that be nice? But it doesn't work that way. It's never worked that way. There are domains where you can do that sort of thing, but this isn't one of them. And that's kind of the thing that I think people also miss is this idea of context. You know, Agile took off. It was very popular. People liked a lot of the ideas behind it, and then proceeded to either misunderstand or misapply them, you know, wildly. I've said this in a number of interviews, but I've had people with a straight face tell me, yes, we're Agile. We do half of Scrum badly, and we use Jira. Woohoo. You know, I don't mean to pick on Jira particularly, you know, substitute any common tool, but no, you know, using a given tool, you know, using Git doesn't make you Agile. Using Jira doesn't make you Agile. In fact, it can have the opposite effect because now you think you're Agile and you can sort of stop trying, right? The important thing is to get away from that concept of fortune telling, right? It's like, oh, I know what the future is going to look like and I'm going to do whatever I do because of that. You don't. You have no idea. And sometimes it's interesting because we'll talk about the pandemic in a bit, but I think the pandemic has really brought home to people just how fragile corporations are, organizations, government, society, you know, everything's kind of doing its best and hanging by a thread, and it's not guaranteed. So anyone who you know, if anyone who did an interview in 2019, late 2019, and said, okay, what do you expect for the next 6 months? Where do you see yourself a year from now? Right? Any of those kinds of questions, completely out the window, right? None of that happened. That was all fiction. And the thing is, that happens all the time. You know, it doesn't have to be as dramatic as a global pandemic, but just market shifts. Your competitor gets bought. You know, your company gets bought out. People get fired. People leave. People get hired. Customer whims change. You know, it's a very volatile, fast-moving environment. So even something as simple as saying, oh, I want to build my code to be extensible and maintainable. No, you don't. That's rubbish. Don't do that. You're fortune telling. Stop that. Make your code replaceable. Admit, I don't know what the future is going to hold. So I may have to rip this whole thing out. Let me design the code so I can rip this out really easily. Okay, dynamite. That's probably worth the investment. And, you know, I think this is really the central message of Agile is to get away from this plan-based, naive approach that thinks that you can do any kind of level of fortune telling and say, and admit, no, we have no idea. We want to write this thing. Well, I don't really know how to write it. Awesome. Admit that. Do 3 or 4 different little quick prototypes. You know, microservices or not, I don't know. It depends on your context. Try a prototype. Try a couple. You think about other areas of endeavor, and, you know, photographers will take hundreds, thousands of pictures of the same scene just to get that one shot. You know, musicians, you know, I have a full studio over here. People will record take after take and comp together the perfect performance. We get a software assignment and we write down the first bloody thing that comes to mind. Ship it.
Yeah.
You know?
So let me jump in over here because I do want to get you to the next question, but I do want to sort of capture what you've said and maybe repeat what I've heard or repeat back to you what I'm understanding.
Which is a great technique, by the way. That's a great way. That's how, you know, the first method of communication is that it happened.
Yeah. So I'm going to put it in my own words, but I think you're saying that with Agile, and maybe with the mindset that we all require with Agile or not, especially in our pandemic type situation, our mindset should not be that of the universe as a Newtonian clockwork model, which is very predictable, but more of a complex adaptive systems where things are changing based on different conditions. I want to come back to that with the third question as we look forward, replace the predictive type rigid model with an adaptive, dare I say, Agile model. But let me jump into my second question, and this is around you personally. This has been a difficult time for many people around the world, and your fans, our fans, Agile folks are looking to inspiration from the authors, such as yourself, of the manifesto, the folks who started this movement 20 years ago. So how are you doing personally in the pandemic?
So it's interesting, and obviously I get asked that a lot. And for the most part, except for catching COVID, which was a bit of a drag, but we had mild symptoms. There's some lasting impact, but for the most part, we got through that okay, despite the best precautions. We were fully masked, hand washing, sanitizer, isolation, the whole deal, and yet we still contracted it. So I think there's a lesson there as well. You can take all the precautions in the world. There's no guarantee. Things will still happen. But in terms of the pandemic itself, we've done okay. We've worked remotely for 25 years. So working remotely now, it's just another Monday. I mean, obviously, there's things I miss going out to eat desperately. There's a lot of activities. Playing in bands with my friends, doing a lot of social activities that it's just there's no online substitute for a lot of that. So I clearly miss a lot of those sorts of things. But I'm hopeful that by next year, by 2022, I think we'll see a lot of that come back. But I think we'll see a lot of things that will never come back. Companies have realized that, wow, I don't have to rent this very expensive commercial real estate. I can have these teams working remotely, and it's working better for us. And there's an interesting thing there, because you have the same communication problems whether your team is remote or co-located. The thing is that once you've got a team working remote, you really have to address them. You can't just sort of paper over the cracks, which maybe you can do when everyone's all in the same office. So it really brings these issues of communication to the forefront, where you kind of are forced to deal with them. But that's good, because then the end result is you get a higher performing team and experience out of it. So I'm hoping a lot of people will realize their options that they may not have considered previously, just out of necessity, and be able to proceed from there.
Fantastic, which is a great segue to my third and final question, which is, what's the next 20 years going to look like, and what's your inspiration to all of your fans and fans of Agile out there for the next decade or so?
I think the number one thing, number two thing, three things, five things. The most important thing you can do, and I realize and re-realize this every several years, you need to read voraciously, and not blog posts, and not just Stack Overflow. I mean, Stack Overflow in Google is great when you have a very specific, what command line argument do I use to this, and what's the sequence of this other thing, and oh God, in this programming language, is it count, length, or size for the length of a string? It could be any of them, right? That kind of stuff, fine, that's great. But for anything that you actually want to understand, you need to read something long form, a book by a respected author that, people generally agree, yes, this is the right thing. This is an expert in the field. And not just read the book and tear through it, but read it, reread it a year later, 6 months later. Every time I go back and reread any particular book, I get a different message out of it, because I'm different. Time has passed, right? What's the old saying? You don't step in the same river twice. And I had gotten out of that habit for, the stresses of running companies and sort of usual things. And I realized, going back, and I was reading something that I thought I remembered very well. I'm like, oh my goodness, there's so much in here I didn't pick up the first time, or it didn't apply to me then, but now, this is coming through. And especially since there's frankly a lot of bad advice on the net.
Right.
There's a lot of people, and even people publish books where it's rubbish. What they're saying is wrong, or wrong for you in your context. Mm-hmm. And, some of it's sort of interesting. You look at a lot of workflows for code, for instance, and some people will advocate having long running feature branches that then you have to merge later. Well, congratulations. You just reinvented waterfall. Good luck with that, right? Yeah. Bad idea. You don't want to do that, but it's out there. It's a thing. And so you have to be careful what you read. You have to, critically analyze it. We suggested that back in the original Pragmatic Programmer book, and it's especially true today when you've got bots fueling the conversation, potentially foreign adversaries or even commercial adversaries that are trying to, fuel the conversation one way or the other. You really need to get a bit of a jaundiced eye with what you read and what you do in your practice. And, feedback, the number one message of Agile to me is feedback. That's the whole point of it. That's why you don't have long-running feature branches. It's too long before you get feedback. It's why you don't plan out detailed design documents for 6 or 12 months from now, because who the hell knows what's going to happen 6 to 12 months? Tomorrow, maybe. You don't want, you got those short time horizons with fast feedback, and try a bunch of things, like the photographer taking the pictures, right? I don't know the best way to do this, or even the right way to do this. Let me try 4 or 5 of them in a quick prototypey language. It doesn't have to be the final language of the project necessarily. Let me just try out a couple ideas, get my head around it, because the prime activity of programming is learning. That's what we actually do. We don't type code. Any monkey can type code, and AI can type code.
Yeah.
What we do that is difficult and hard to explain and hard to replicate and hard to scale is learning.
Fantastic. So if I might sort of pull it together again, and with my understanding, because we started some earlier, you were talking about developing that mindset or not having the mindset of the rigid, pedantic, Newtonian clockwork model. There's no clockwork model. The input is not always going to be the output. It's not deterministic. So how, the agile mindset, as you're advocating over here, is one that says, let's keep experimenting. Let's understand that there's always going to be changes. Things are going to be changing, but let's experiment. Let's read voraciously. Let's learn continuously, and let's converge on things through experimentation. Did I get that right?
Yes, absolutely. And of course, there's more to it than that. You need to look at, some of the things that people are researching, like the Cynefin model. Look at Wordley mapping, right? Because, Wordley mapping, to me, if you take nothing else from it, just realize that whatever the state of the world is now, it's not static.
That's right.
This thing that you just invented is going to become a commodity, and everything is in flux and it's moving this way. And as it does, these things happen. That's a hugely powerful lesson to think about. Cynefin, I think, is brilliant to realize that, okay, here's these 4 different domains. Complex. Agile fits in here. It's not a universal thing, right? If I've got a manufacturing line, I want to reduce variance. I want to exploit the capabilities of the production line. It's not an area for exploration. That's not where you would use an agile process. But on a development team, especially as the number of unknowns grows, it has to be about exploration. It can't be about optimization. So yeah, these are important things, and I really wish folks would go to the sources and read the original papers, the original books, go on to forums, join the discussion, see what people are saying about these sorts of topics, and realize there's more to life than doing a couple of scrum practices and filing away your tickets.
Fantastic. Andy, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. This is great advice. And thanks once again for coming on the show.
Thanks so much for having me.